Welcome to another edition of On Location. Today we have two guests. The first, Fritz Klein. He's been portraying Abraham Lincoln for nearly 40 years. And then we drop by the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and talk to James Cornelius. He's curator of the Lincoln Collection. That's right, today we're looking for Lincoln on location. You might have seen him on the National Geographic Channel, or perhaps on the History Channel, goofing around with Larry the Cable Guy. Either way, we know Abraham Lincoln as Fritz Klein, and he dropped by for a visit. And here we are, welcome back to On Location, and today we are sitting here honored to have in our presence Abraham Lincoln, or as you may know him, Fritz Klein. And Fritz, thank you for joining us today. It's
Good to be
a certain
here.
pleasure to have you here.
Yes.
Now, we've talked about this briefly, you and I, off camera, but can you tell us a little bit about the number of years that you have been Abraham Lincoln, or been portraying him, I should say?
Yes. Well, I was first asked to do this in 1976. I was a little younger then. And it was, we were a part of an organization called Youth with a Mission, and lived in Hawaii. And it was intended to be for the bicentennial weekend celebration there locally. So it started in 1976. It became full-time in 1980.
So what made you think about, I mean, did you feel like you looked a little bit like Abraham Lincoln? Was it, being tall and lanky, so to speak, or what initially got you into portraying Lincoln?
Well, part of my activities in Hawaii were voluntary association with local productions that our mission was putting on. One of them was an annual pageant, and then other kinds of productions. I was just cast as Lincoln, or I was asked if I would take the role. I didn't expect it would grow into anything. In fact, initially I turned it down.
Is that right?
I thought I'm too young.
Oh, okay.
So, and it's a very intimidating role.
Well, it's the great emancipator.
Right.
Right. So I can understand that. So what changed your mind to actually go ahead and do it then?
Well, they sent a former professional makeup artist, with my approval of course, to show me how much I could look like Lincoln with enough time and effort. Took 4 hours.
Whoa.
I was surprised. When I looked in the mirror, I was more shocked than anyone. I found out later some people had looked at me in years prior and thought of Lincoln. It had never occurred to me until the director asked me if I would take the role.
Now, you had to do, I'm assuming, some research to get into the role.
Yes.
Or did that come over time?
Well, the initial plan, yes and yes.
Okay.
The initial plan was to learn a script. We found out that the script was copyrighted and that we couldn't use it. So then I ended up writing my own based on Lincoln's words. And that took some research, but not a lot. It was only about 10 minutes, which we did over and over.
And you touched upon another question of mine. How much traveling and how extensive has it been over all these years?
Well, we moved to Springfield thinking that in a place like this I wouldn't have to travel much. Right. Well, we were wrong. So I've traveled extensively. I probably spend a fourth to a third of my time on the road. More so in the fall and the spring and the winter. Now we have this History Comes Alive program in the summer, and I get to stay home, sleep in my own bed, and do what normal people do, so which I like. Yeah.
Sure. So now, what are maybe some upcoming events that we can look for you at?
Locally, I'm going to be, the next thing that I know of that's open to the public will be a Gettysburg Address production at the Presidential Museum in November.
In November,
Yeah.
right. It was a large anniversary for that.
Yes, 150th. So now I may be out in Gettysburg involved with some events recreating when Lincoln journeyed to Gettysburg several days before, but we'll see.
Now, you have to have run into other people that play Lincoln.
Yes, there are many.
And what is it like, though, to see other Lincolns? Do you kind of get inspiration from them, or is it just an honor to be alongside of them?
Well, when I first came up with this concept, I thought I was alone. When I discovered that there were other people doing something similar, and some of them doing a one-man production as Lincoln, I concluded that I wanted to focus on Lincoln himself and not the way other people were interpreting. So I have made a policy over the years not to see other people perform as Lincoln, so that I can make sure everything I do is original. And I get inspiration from other performers, but I steer away from anybody who portrays Lincoln.
Okay. Now, the makeup aspect of this, you have the beard, and that's
Yes.
a real thing.
Yeah,
I'm not
that's
going to
real.
pull on it today. But, so what process do you go through to get into character?
Well, of course, adding hair, that was important right from the beginning. My hair looked like this about when I was 17.
Oh.
So, but other than that, initially it took nearly 4 hours. I was young, and I've always looked younger than I was. Lincoln always looked older than he was, at least as an adult. So initially it took 4 hours, but it doesn't take me that long anymore. I can do the essential makeup in about 20 minutes. I give myself a full hour for makeup and dress, and things
And the
like that.
costumes, where do they come from then?
I researched Lincoln's clothing very carefully, actually had in my hands and wore the clothes that he wore the night he was assassinated, with permission, of course. And so I made a pattern of that clothing, and at the time I believe I was the only one that owned it. And so my clothes is authentic. I've had several tailors do the work. Right now there's a man in Ohio that does my work, and so it's not easy stuff.
And as you've traveled across the country and appeared in South Dakota or wherever, what's the response from the crowds? I mean, is it a worldwide, like a worldwide type of recognition of Abraham Lincoln, like from China to Europe, all over the world? Do people come up to greet you in all languages of the world? I mean, what type of experience is that?
I think there is more international, how shall I say this? We used to do an event in Chicago that was called Great Performers of Illinois, and we would meet hundreds of people over 2 or 3 days. The ones who would come up to me most often were the internationals. There were many Americans there, but they walked right past me. It was the internationals primarily who were still impressed with what Lincoln did, wanted to have pictures taken with me and so forth. I'm not certain what that says. On one side it says that Lincoln is very well known internationally, but on the other side perhaps it's not taught now in America as it used to be. There are still many people in America that love Lincoln, but he certainly has perhaps more international recognition than any other American in history.
Well, it's certainly a pleasure. Now, here recently, we saw you on Larry the Cable Guy. We had you out skipping down, I think it was 8th Street with him.
I know.
So what are some of the other actual programs that maybe we have seen you on that maybe just didn't recognize you right off the bat?
I've done a lot of work for National Geographic, Smithsonian Channel. Some people don't even know that exists. discovery, history, a couple feature films, and people will see me. There was apparently on National Geographic in this past year, sort of a Fritz Klein night where they showed various films that I'd been in for the whole evening.
Is that right?
On one of those, documentary stations. I usually miss these things, but I've had people tell me
hear about
these
them
things.
after the
or
fact.
hear about them afterwards.
Right. Well, I appreciate you coming by and taking time out from your busy schedule to come visit us, and have sincerely appreciated it. Now, one thing we will show after we finish our interview here is your farewell address that was at Lincoln Depot. And anything in particular you want to maybe talk about with that particular speech that you give there, and how often maybe do you give it there?
Well, during the summer, I give it weekly as a part of the History Comes Alive program. That speech is a gem. It was a very emotional speech, and Lincoln gave it impromptu. He didn't expect the people that turned out there. Probably 10% of Springfield's population was there. And so I just think it shows Lincoln's ability to summarize, beautify, and target his object succinctly, clearly, and beautifully on the hoof. It's amazing, that speech.
Well, when I videotaped this, it certainly struck me as well. So
Yeah.
Again, thank you for coming in to see us today.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll have you back,
Wonderful. Well, thanks for watching.
and enjoy.
When Lincoln first came to Springfield in 1837, it was 1,400 people. When he left in February, on the 11th day, 1861, Springfield had grown to over 10,000. About 1,000 of those people were here. Lincoln was overwhelmed. He didn't expect that many people. It was a rather chilly, gray, rainy morning. The train was on those tracks, headed that direction, and Lincoln's car was right where the intersection is, the last of the cars. It was painted bright yellow with trimmings specially fixed up for the president. On the inside was gold satin, not gold, blue satin with silver stars studded, one for each state, all around on the walls, flags crossed over each doorway. And when Lincoln went in, it's not known if Mrs. Lincoln was here in the crowd. It is known she was not on the train. Robert was on the train, but the two little boys and Mrs. Lincoln, we don't know whether she was here or not. There was some confusion as to whether it would be safer for him to have his wife and little ones with him or not. After he left without her, they decided it was a mistake and she should join him. So she joined him in Indianapolis. The remarks he made were entirely impromptu. It was described as the most emotional speech that at times he could barely get his composure. The description said his breast heaved with emotion and he struggled to maintain his composure. And this is what he said. My friends, no one in my situation can appreciate my feeling of sadness at this parting. To this place and the kindness of these people, I owe everything. Here, I have lived a quarter of a century and have passed from the young to an old man. Here my children have been born, and one is buried. I now leave, not knowing when or whether ever I may return, with a task before me greater than that which rested upon Washington. Without the aid of that divine being, whoever attended him, I cannot succeed. With that aid, I cannot fail. Trusting in him, who can go with me and remain with you and be everywhere for good, let us confidently hope that all will yet be well. To his care commending you, as I trust in your prayers you will commend me, I bid you an affectionate farewell.
Abraham Lincoln. Whether you're a huge fan of Abraham Lincoln or perhaps just a scholar of his writings, the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum is not to be missed. We dropped by to talk with James Cornelius, curator of the Lincoln Collection. And here we are at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library, right across the street from the museum, and today we're sitting with James Cornelius. He is curator of the Lincoln Collection. And I am so proud to be here today, sir, and thank you very much for inviting us in and talking with us.
My pleasure, Kurt.
How long have you been curator here?
I've been here about 6.5 years. So I wasn't here at the opening, which was just over 8 years ago.
Right.
I missed all that excitement and all that drama, but it's a great place to work.
Right, we had the president outside,
Yes.
bringing open the doors.
We've had senators and governors and foreign dignitaries and millions of the average people.
That's beautiful. Now, you're in charge, curator of the Lincoln Collection. So tell me exactly how extensive is the Lincoln Collection?
It's 52,000 items, which is mostly books and papers. That's pretty small for this whole building, since we're also the State Historical Library still, which was the old name before 2004. So 90% of what's in this building is Illinois history and general Civil War, especially, and other strengths, genealogy and whatnot. And that overlaps to some extent with the Lincoln Collection. So paintings, sculptures, photographs, prints, pieces of wood from every building Lincoln lived in, except for the White House. Books that the family owned, obviously a little bit of Mary's clothing and apparel.
And all that's kept here.
And all that's kept here. This is the world's largest collection of Lincoln things.
So how many pieces would you say?
52,000.
52,000 pieces.
Yeah.
So how do you manage all of that? I mean, that's a lot to keep track of, number one, much less to keep it rotated. And that is partly what the museum's all about, is being able to display those pieces.
Right. Well, and we're a research collection too, of course. Researchers are coming in here all the time, or emailing or calling. And a lot of that stuff, as I say, is just books and papers. Old, new, in between, rare, not rare. And I've got a couple of great staff members who help keep it all in order. The published books are one thing, reference files full of the strangest categories. People want to know about the Lincoln's dogs, you know, and they want to know about his stovepipe hat.
And you have all that.
We have all this. We've got all these files, and we've got files on all the artists who've ever drawn Lincoln, or sculptors who've sculpted him, and sheet music about him.
So how do you go about validifying these pieces as people bring them to you, or as they donate them to you? How do you go about the validity of them?
Yeah, that's tough. A fair bit of the best stuff in this collection came directly from the Lincoln family. The last descendant of Abraham and Mary died in 1985, and there are no other direct heirs. And he gave us about 8 years before that a whole bunch of wonderful material, paintings, sculptures, books, clothing, documents, other things from the family's own homes. Otherwise, we bought, that is our foundation bought about 6 years ago, the biggest privately owned collection of Lincoln stuff, which we call Lincolniana, which is a fun word to say.
Now, what are some of your favorite pieces of this collection? You have to have some favorites.
I do, and it changes from time to time. Of course, the most famous ones are his stovepipe hat from his Illinois days. It was purchased about 2 blocks from where we sit on the public square, on the west side of the square, from Josiah Adams's hat shop. Wow. And then the Gettysburg Address, of course, which is on display right now until the end of November for the anniversary of it, 150th this year.
Right.
I'm pretty touched by some 1848 letters between Abraham and Mary. We sort of refer to them as love letters, although they're not kissy smoochy love letters. But he was in Washington as a congressman at the time. She was back in Kentucky staying with her father and family with the 2 little boys. And they burned almost all of their personal correspondence before they left for Washington in 1861. Right. But a few things survived, and so this little pair of dear Mary and dear my dear husband letters are really wonderful, and they're the most personal things, I think.
So at any given time, how many of those 52,000 are actually on display at the museum?
Yeah, good question. There are 34 display cases in the Presidential Museum here that are sealed, are environmentally monitored, and are essentially locked up, break-proof, that hold right now a total of about 110 historic items. Some of those are usually not Lincoln. There's a big case in the Ghosts of the Library queue, the waiting room, where we do other Illinois history or other topics. And we've done Stephen Douglas, we've done the Mormons, we've done the Chicago World's Fair, lots of different topics. So that call it about 100 on average at any given time in those 33, 34 cases.
And then how often are they rotated or maybe added to or just a few subtracted from?
Right. Well, that's becoming tougher as we have fewer and fewer staff here, as the state of Illinois' budget difficulties continue to affect us pretty badly in some ways. But in other ways, we keep going because we have to. There's one thing that's permanent in there, and that is the tombstone of their second boy, Eddie Lincoln, who died at the age of 3 here in Springfield in 1850. And that is permanently there on display. Then otherwise, there's anywhere, depending on the material, from 6 months to 2, 3, 4 years for things. Paper, of course, has to come out of the light, even though it's monitored light. We don't want to leave it in there for too long. Ink fades. Paper very slowly disintegrates when exposed to light and oxygen. You can't stop that. They try to do the best they can with the Declaration of Independence at the National Archives in Washington. We don't have the facilities for the incredibly expensive atmospherically controlled case they have for that. But we've got things that are pretty close.
Right.
And otherwise, things like a book that one of the family members owned, or a sculpture by a fine artist made in the early 20th century, say, that can sit out for some time. But we do try to rotate everything. Next week we will change out one of the cases that hasn't been changed in a long time about Lincoln's tomb and the afterlife of the tomb.
Now, for those individuals that haven't been by the museum, what are the operating hours that they can go in and view these pieces?
We're open 9 to 5, 362 days a year. So every weekend, but the only days we're closed are Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's Day.
Oh, even on Sundays you're open?
Even on Sundays.
Wow.
Every Sunday.
That's fantastic.
It is.
Now, probably, unfortunately, our time flies by here very quickly. And I'm wondering, how does it make you feel to be in charge, the curator of such a collection of artifacts of one of our most famous presidents of all time?
It is an honor and a thrill most days. It's especially exciting to show things to the public, both live over there and on some researchers here and VIP guests who are either maybe just passing through from another state or another country, or are potential donors to our foundation. They get a little behind the scenes peek, as we'll have in a moment here, at some things that I get to show them privately. And people weep when they see some of these things. The Emancipation Proclamation is extremely powerful to a lot of people. And his stovepipe hat generally draws a gasp from almost everyone who sees it.
Now, you mentioned we're going to take a look a little bit behind the scenes here in a moment. What are we going to see in this little episode?
Well, it's not very exciting visually in some respects. It's a large closet, basically. We keep all of the books downstairs on compact shelving. That is, it rolls when you push a button to save space. And shelves and drawers full of those thousands of old newspapers, prints, photographs, broadsides, other things from the era, artworks. And then inside the vault, within a vault, is where we keep Lincoln's manuscripts and those of his family and their private possessions.
Oh, beautiful. Well,
Yeah.
I'm excited about seeing that, and I really appreciate you bringing us down here today and letting us view what we are going to be viewing.
Okay.
And thank you, and please invite us back when you got something going on.
I will. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Okay. And this is some of the more priceless items, I guess.
Yes. Almost everything that belongs to the family or is in some other way very valuable, we keep in this room. A couple of things are too big, or you just have to lay flat in one of those locked drawers out there. But Abraham's a note to Secretary of War Cameron in 1861. Please lose no time in giving an interview to Adjutant General Wheat of Western Virginia and furnishing him, if possible, with what arms, equipage in French, etc. he needs. This is very important and should not be neglected or delayed. This is the start of the state of West Virginia, breaking off from slave-holding Lower Virginia.
Wow. That's incredible.
Sure when it was taken or where, but it's very rare, so it was a great discovery.
Is that the necklace that lady was talking about?
Mary's diamond necklace.
Oh, is that Mary's?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, geez. That's beautiful. Did Lincoln give that to her?
Mm-hmm.
What's this other
Diamonds and
necklace?
gold. This one is red coral, which Mary bought on her own, as far as we know. Coral is illegal now to work with or to trade in, but it was legal in those days.
Well, another Sunday has come to pass, and we really appreciate you tuning in today. If you have any questions or comments, please send them in to us at On Location, care of Beatty Televisual, 1287 Wabash Avenue, Springfield, Illinois 62704. And don't forget, you can always tune us in on the YouTube channel at On Location 217. If it's Sundays, we're here on location.